were gentlemen. I mean, they weren't assholes. They were nice men, but they were hardcore. They were hard-working men.
At the age of 80, Sam Elliott finally broke his long-held cowboy silence, openly admitting the difficulties he had faced working with certain colleagues. Known for his deep voice and stern demeanor, Elliott revealed 7 actors he simply could not stand sharing the set with, labeling one a starstruck diva and another all ego with no talent. After decades in Hollywood, he decided it was time to speak the truth, and his words hit as hard as a desert standoff. Among those names, the one that sparked the greatest attention was none other than Benedict Cumberbatch. In 2021, Sam Elliott set off a firestorm when he launched a scathing attack on The Power of the Dog, Jane Campion's Oscar-winning psychological western. His remarks were not calculated or diplomatic but raw, unfiltered, and instinctive, the voice of a man who had spent his life guarding the spirit of the American West. During a podcast appearance, Elliott didn't hesitate to cut down the film, calling it a hollow piece of pretension. What shocked listeners most was not only his dismissal of its slow pace or art-heavy style, but the way he directly targeted the lead performance by Benedict Cumberbatch with sharp disdain. Elliott mocked the British actor's stiff posture, clipped delivery, and polished mannerisms, portraying him as a fragile, unconvincing cowboy. He even scoffed, questioning what a Brit could possibly know about the American West. For Elliott, it wasn't just about acting technique, it was about authenticity, a value he held sacred. To him, Cumberbatch's performance felt artificial, more like costume drama than lived experience. But his words unleashed immediate backlash. Critics and film scholars accused Elliott of gatekeeping the Western genre, of refusing to acknowledge modern interpretations of masculinity. The Power of the Dog had been praised for its daring exploration of male identity in a broader, more inclusive light, an approach that Elliott saw as undermining the very essence of the Western tradition he had spent a lifetime defending. Many believe that Sam Elliott simply refused to let go of the stoic, hypermasculine archetype that once defined the Western, now being challenged and reshaped by a new generation of filmmakers. Yet Elliott never wavered. He did not offer a half-hearted apology, nor did he attempt to soften his words in a polished PR interview. He stood firm, unshaken. For him, this was not about artistic license, it was about respect. He believed the film had misunderstood the very essence of the West, glorifying its romantic surface while ignoring the grit, the silence, and the unforgiving reality of that life. Worse still, in his eyes, it disrespected the very traditions it claimed to honor, turning the cowboy into something fragile and foreign rather than flawed and human. Though Benedict Cumberbatch never responded publicly, insiders revealed that he was deeply hurt by the criticism. After all, Cumberbatch had poured himself into the role, learning ranch work and even staying in character off camera. But for Elliott, no amount of method acting could bridge what he saw as a fundamental cultural divide. To this day, Sam Elliott has never softened his stance. In his worldview, the West is not something to be loosely interpreted, it is something to be understood. It is not a costume, not a lighting scheme, not an Oscar campaign. It is a way of life built on solitude, struggle, and unspoken rules. And to Elliott, The Power of the Dog broke those rules, not with malice, perhaps, but with ignorance. For that, he could not remain silent. The next name on his list was Nicolas Cage. Throughout his career, Sam Elliott has believed in the power of restraint. To him, acting is a quiet storm, controlled, internal, and purposeful. A pause can speak louder than a paragraph, and a single glance can reveal an entire story. Shaped by the grit of real life and the discipline of classic cinema, Elliott values subtlety above all else. In his eyes, the loudest man in the room is often the weakest. Emotion, he believes, should simmer rather than explode. So when Nicolas Cage burst into the spotlight with his trademark intensity and unpredictable energy, Elliot didn't see brilliance, he saw chaos. Even as Cage rose to fame, winning awards, commanding headlines, and building a fiercely loyal fan base, Elliot remained unimpressed. To him, the wild crescendos and wide-eyed outbursts felt more theatrical than truthful. Ghost Rider brought the two men together on screen, but not in spirit. Elliot delivered his role with the same weathered gravitas he always carried, yet off camera he kept his distance, polite, professional, but detached. Later, he would speak broadly about actors who hijack scenes with ego, bending the story to their self-expression rather than serving the character. Close friends claimed there was no doubt who he meant. Of Cage, he once reportedly said, "More firework than flame." A cutting remark, an indictment of spectacle over substance. To Sam Elliott, Nicolas Cage represented a kind of acting that chose chaos over clarity and spectacle over substance. Where Elliot believed the finest performances came from stillness, from the quiet moments that draw an audience inward to feel the unspoken, Cage burst outward, erupting with a restless energy that Elliot found hollow. No matter how many awards Cage collected, how many directors applauded his daring choices, or how many fans admired his unpredictability, Elliot never changed his stance. He did not see bold innovation. He saw a decline. The slow-burning artistry he cherished was being drowned out by noise. This was never about bitterness or rivalry. Elliot was not trying to compete. He lived by a personal code built on integrity, patience, and respect for silence. To him, acting was never about standing in the spotlight but about vanishing into the truth of a character. The flamboyant gestures and eccentric decisions of Nicolas Cage violated that code. And for Sam Elliott, this wasn't merely a difference in approach. It was a betrayal of what acting was meant to be. The same conviction shaped his feelings toward Kevin Costner. Sam Elliott built his career not only on talent but on something far rarer in Hollywood: authenticity. From the gravel in his voice to the deliberate, measured gait of a man shaped by long roads, Elliot did not just play cowboys, he lived as one. Raised in the American West and steeped in ranch traditions, he carried real life into every role. The sun-worn skin, the narrowed eyes, the thoughtful pause before speaking, these were not affectations. They were lived truth. So when Kevin Costner stepped into the Western genre, first in Wyatt Earp and later in the widely celebrated Yellowstone, Elliot could not accept it. To him, Costner embodied a polished Hollywood version of the West, where the boots were spotless, the dialogue refined, and the cattle carried no dust or smell. Though Costner projected intensity and held the screen with authority, Elliot saw only artifice. It was too handsome, too carefully measured, closer to a magazine spread than the raw hardships of the frontier. In private, he reportedly remarked that Costner played a rancher as if it were dress-up, a kind of cosplay rather than lived experience. For Elliot, this went deeper than critiquing a single performance. It was an indictment of a broader culture of storytelling that, in his eyes, had lost its connection to the true spirit of the West. He believed the Western was sacred, not merely a film genre but a philosophy, a code of quiet strength, honor, and respect for the land and those who endured it. He found none of that in Yellowstone. Despite the show's massive success, its sweeping landscapes, its family conflicts, and Costner's gravelly delivery, Elliot remained unmoved. What others praised as authentic drama, he dismissed as a soap opera dressed in boots. Reports surfaced that he was even offered a cameo role, a respectful nod to his legacy as a Western icon. Yet Elliot rejected it outright. According to one source, he brushed it aside as nothing more than a soap opera in a cowboy hat. For him, the refusal was not just about declining a part. It was about protecting values, preserving integrity, and honoring truth. Accepting the role would not only have betrayed himself, it would have betrayed the West that lived in his soul. The strain between Sam Elliott and Kevin Costner never exploded into open conflict. There were no public arguments, no heated exchanges. As one veteran producer described it, they never raised their voices, but the chill between them could freeze a desert. It was not born of personal dislike. It was about principle. Elliot stood as a guardian of the old code, the unspoken laws of grit and silence where honor carried more weight than ego. Costner, despite his star power and undeniable success, represented to Elliot a version of the West that felt unfamiliar, polished, cinematic, carefully curated, but ultimately hollow. If there was one trait that irritated Sam Elliott more than anything, it was pretension. Not arrogance in its blunt form, but the kind dressed up as artistic depth. Grand theatrics paraded as brilliance, attention-seeking disguised as commitment. For Elliot, acting was a discipline grounded in humility and truth, never spectacle. That is why when Jared Leto gained notoriety for his extreme method acting, sending rats to fellow cast members during Suicide Squad, refusing to break character off set, and blurring the line between performer and persona, Elliot saw no trailblazer. He saw a showman chasing headlines. To a close friend, Elliot reportedly dismissed it with a roll of his eyes, saying the younger actor was turning acting into a carnival. In his mind, there was nothing admirable about stunts masquerading as dedication. The craft was not supposed to spill beyond the lens of the camera. It was meant to be internal, quiet, honest. You did not need to terrorize colleagues or live inside a character 24 hours a day to deliver truth. You only needed to understand the story and disappear into it. Though Elliot and Leto never shared a set, insiders claimed their paths nearly crossed. Elliot had once been loosely attached to a project that was later restructured to center on Leto. When he learned of the change, he walked away without statement or fuss. No announcement, no drama, just silence. That silence was its own message. For a man who regarded acting as sacred ground, working alongside someone who cheapened the craft was never an option. Those close to Elliot insist his disdain has nothing to do with jealousy or generational divide. It comes from a difference in values. To him, the greatest acting never calls attention to itself. It does not shout. It whispers. It is carried in a weighted glance, a quiet pause, a presence so real it does not need tricks or props. Leto's approach, by contrast, felt to Elliot like performance for the sake of headlines, where the story became secondary to the circus around it. With an Oscar on his shelf and a devoted following, Jared Leto may hold respect in certain circles, but to Sam Elliott, he embodies what Hollywood has lost: humility, restraint, and the quiet dignity of simply doing the work. To Elliot, acting has never been about transformation at any cost. It is about truth, told with simplicity. And in his eyes, Leto is the poster figure of a modern era that prizes spectacle over substance, shock over sincerity. That is why Elliot keeps his distance, not out of malice, but out of loyalty to the discipline he has spent his life defending. In an industry where louder often means better, Sam Elliott remains committed to the quiet power of restraint and to walking away from anything that betrays that code. The same philosophy shaped his response when paired with Ashton Kutcher. To Sam Elliott, acting was never about fame, followers, or feeding algorithms. For him, it was a craft, something to be respected, earned, and carried with quiet dignity. He belonged to the old school, where every word spoken on screen should come from truth, and presence was forged from lived experience rather than media polish. So when Ashton Kutcher, fresh from sitcom fame, romantic comedies, and tech ventures, was cast alongside him in Netflix's The Ranch. It was not a clash of egos but a collision of two very different worlds. It was nothing short of a collision of worlds. From the very beginning, Sam Elliott carried himself with professionalism. He arrived on set, delivered his lines with the same weathered gravitas that had defined his long career, and maintained a measured distance. Yet those who worked behind the cameras noticed a quiet tension in the air, subtle, steady, and unmistakable. Elliott was never one to rant or explode. Instead, his disapproval showed in small gestures, a slow shake of the head, a narrowed look, or a muttered remark that carried more weight than any long speech. One crew member remembered hearing him quietly say, "He's a decent guy, but no real actor." That sentiment was not fueled by jealousy or resentment. To Elliott, it was simply the truth. Ashton Kutcher, with his charisma and easygoing charm, symbolized what Elliott distrusted most about modern Hollywood, a system where charm outweighed depth, where image eclipsed substance. While Elliott had clawed his way upward through years of minor roles, supporting parts, and slow-earned respect, Kutcher had vaulted into fame on the back of sitcom punchlines, tabloid headlines, and viral popularity. In public, Ashton Kutcher was nothing but gracious. He called Elliott a mentor, praised his wisdom, and spoke often about how fortunate he felt to work alongside a legend. But privately, Elliott remained unconvinced. At one point, he reportedly remarked, "He's acting like a guy who saw acting on YouTube." For Elliott, playing a role was never enough. You had to live it, understand it, wrestle with its truths. And while Kutcher's playful energy made him appealing to audiences, it lacked the gravity that Elliott believed real storytelling required. Even so, Sam Elliott never made it personal. He did not sabotage scenes, refuse interaction, or try to diminish his co-star. His resistance had nothing to do with ego. It was about standards. It was about preserving a craft that he considered sacred. In an industry where algorithms and trends increasingly dictated success, Elliott saw himself as a last sentinel, guarding the old values of discipline, authenticity, and depth. For him, acting was holy ground. And while he might shake his head at what stardom had become, he would not betray the principles that shaped his life. Not for ratings. Not for relevance. Not for anything. The same uncompromising spirit flared again in 2022, when the ripple effects of Sam Elliott's blistering critique of The Power of the Dog reached a breaking point. Director Jane Campion did not hesitate to fire back. Accepting the top honor at the Directors Guild of America Awards, she stunned the audience by dismissing Elliott as a little bit of a, delivering the barb with a sharpness worthy of one of Elliott's own cutting screen moments. Her response was not casual or offhand. It was deliberate, a full-throated rebuttal to what she regarded as an outdated, sexist, and narrow-minded attack, not just on her film, but on her craft, and more pointedly, on her right to tell a Western story. The feud had begun when Elliott, speaking on a podcast, lashed out at The Power of the Dog in blunt and unfiltered terms. And in that moment, the battle between old guard tradition and modern reimagining of the West was laid bare for all of Hollywood to see. When Sam Elliott spoke out against The Power of the Dog, his criticism went beyond the film itself. He dismissed the lead performance, mocking Benedict Cumberbatch's attempt at portraying a cowboy, and ridiculed the film's understanding of the American West. What caught even more attention, however, was his critique of director Jane Campion. In Elliott's eyes, a filmmaker from New Zealand had no place trying to unravel the psychological depths of cowboy culture. For him, it was not just a matter of geography but of legitimacy. He did not view The Power of the Dog as a daring reimagining of the Western, but as the stylized vision of an outsider, stripped of the lived-in truth that he held sacred. Jane Campion, celebrated for her sharp intellect and uncompromising artistic vision, was not about to let those remarks pass unanswered. At the Directors Guild of America Awards, she fired back with a cutting remark of her own. "He's not a cowboy," she said flatly. "He's an actor." The words landed like a thunderclap. They did not just call out Elliot personally, they struck at the foundation of the very ethos he had spent decades embodying. To many, the moment was more than a rebuttal, it was a cultural reckoning, a direct clash between old Hollywood's guarded traditions and a new wave of inclusive, boundary-pushing storytelling. Campion went further still, accusing Elliot of sexism and of being unable to stomach her film's exploration of repressed masculinity and emotional vulnerability, particularly under the direction of a woman. In her view, Elliot's critique had less to do with craftsmanship than with control. She framed his words as an attempt to gatekeep a genre long dominated by male voices, a refusal to allow new perspectives to reshape it. The fallout was immediate and widely covered. Yet even as headlines swirled and debate raged, Elliot remained silent. Insiders close to him suggested he was unshaken. His principles had not shifted, even if they cost him favor within the Hollywood elite. To him, this was not a quarrel but a philosophical divide, a battle over the very soul of the Western. That same sense of quiet conviction shaped his complicated relationship with Jeff Bridges. Once, the two men had seemed like mirrors of each other, grounded, soulful, carrying the kind of natural weight that made every line of dialogue feel timeless. When they appeared together in The Big Lebowski, their chemistry was effortless. Elliot's deep, deliberate cadence as the stranger paired perfectly with Bridges' laid-back embodiment of the dude. Off-screen, too, their camaraderie felt genuine. Both men cut from the same cloth, both valuing grit over glamour. But over time, something shifted. After Jeff Bridges won the Oscar for Crazy Heart in 2010, a performance widely praised for its raw honesty, those close to Elliot noticed a change. It was not sudden, but subtle, a polish in Bridges' public persona, a more curated presence, a man now deeply aware of his elevated status in Hollywood. For Elliot, who had built his career on the belief that fame should never alter who you are, the change was disappointing. It was not envy that he felt but the quiet ache of watching a kindred spirit drift away. He hinted at his feelings in a later interview, offering a cryptic but telling observation: "Some folks change, others just show who they always were." Many interpreted this as a veiled reference to Bridges. It was not cruel, but it carried a sting. Over time, the silence between them grew louder. They no longer attended each other's premieres. The mutual support once so easily offered was gone. Their absence from each other's lives spoke volumes. For Elliot, the hurt was not about betrayal but about loss. Losing someone who once felt like a brother not to conflict, but to change. That kind of loss is not something you fight. It is something you mourn. And for a man like Sam Elliott, who holds loyalty as sacred, the silence between him and Jeff Bridges became more powerful than any public feud could ever be. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.